everybody, it's Dr. Nan and the amazing disappearing Jilly here to talk to you about the desire curve and your erotic love style. So it looks like I'm on the beach, but actually I'm in my little office at home, and I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint presentation. Yay! I love PowerPoint because I'm a nerd. I'm a sex nerd, so let's get this party started. So we're going to go to my PowerPoint and we're going to share it from this particular current slide. Okay. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the desire curve. So you see here is the baseline when you're first getting into a relationship. This is the peak of your new honeymoon phase, and this is after the new relationship energy or new relationship euphoria goes down. So let's talk about what we're seeing here, the desire curve. For men, the spontaneous and receptive desire is higher overall than women. So what we mean by receptive desire is when the desire is lying underneath the surface waiting to get bloomed. When we're talking about active desire, that's when you're feeling horny, when you have that urge to merge. So if you look at men overall, both their receptive and active desire is higher than women's receptive and active desire. So for men, the receptive desire is very similar to their active desire. Okay. Very, very similar. If you see also for both sexes, the spontaneous active desire, when you're really ready to merge, the urge to merge is highest at the peak of your new relationship energy or new relationship euphoria, as we call it. Now, for women, it's a little bit different story. For women, the only time that their spontaneous active desire consistently exceeds the more receptive desire other than at ovulation, because at ovulation, women will initiate sex more than any other time of the month. The only other time is at peak new relationship energy, euphoria. That's the honeymoon time. Now you can see for women, the receptive desire is generally higher than the active desire, other than at the new relationship peak. So for most of the curve, women's receptive desire is higher, which means you can jumpstart it into active desire with a little bit of seduction, a little bit of arousal to get the party started. And finally, for both sexes, spontaneous, which is the active desire, and receptive, which is more responsive desire, returns to the baseline that it was quite similar to this baseline post new relationship energy. So often what happens is people are comparing here to there, thinking, oh no, something's wrong, rather than looking at the beginning before the relationship peak. So today we're going to talk about our erotic fingerprints or our sexual styles, how we each have a unique one or a couple of them. And this can interact. Our style can interact with our partner's desire curve, our style and their style. So what's this unique erotic fingerprint or sexual style? First identified by the sex therapist, Sandra Pertot. And she identified these different kinds of libido types. Now, I stepped in and I said the erotic fingerprints include biological dimensions, including your own temperament, your natural desire set point that can vary from person to person. And that's rooted in how active your core emotional lust system is, as well as the imbalances in your core emotions. Like if you're very sad, if you're very fearful, if you're very angry, that will dampen your ability to be in touch with your lust. And this is also impacted by psychological influences. So experiences we have that shape how we feel about sex, how we feel about sexuality, what we like, what we don't like, all of that. Plus the bigger social climate, including us slut-shaming women rather than how we treat men, where we celebrate males being very sexual. And we need to also look at where we are with our own desire relationship curve. That affects our erotic energy. And our goal is to gain insight into our sexual style, how we typically think about sex, how we experience it, and how we desire it. And it can also explain possible disconnects with our partner, or even when we have trouble connecting with our own selves sexually, depending on what's going on in our lives and our relationships. So we're going to start with the soulful lover, eye-gazing, romance, tender lovemaking, touchy-feely contact and closeness above all. They're less sensitive to the ups and downs of the desire curve because they're more motivated by connection than sex itself. They, as a result, are more keyed into the responsive desire that can be kindled by seduction and connection. So they may need a bit more seduction and jump starting, which can cause a problem if their partner doesn't initiate sex with them after the drop off, the loss of new relationship energy. If this soulful lover happens to have relatively low lust in their core emotions and a low level of play, again, play is an important core emotion that's stifled in a lot of us adults, they may seem more like a disinterested lover. They're available to sex for pleasing the partner and to get close. And they can be allergic to partners who are more fixated on sex, more fixated on intensity or exploration. So now we're going to talk about the rough and tumble lover. It's not sex unless the furniture flies. Sex is an athletic contact sport for them. They're not well matched with the soulful lover who wants to connect and be soulful. They tend to have, in general, high set points of active desire, but they may experience the plunge post new relationship energy is very upsetting. They may feel upset if they lose their own active desire or their partner doesn't seem as motivated after the honeymoon phase wears off. They tend toward more dramatic internal experiences. These people might be a little attached to intensity and drama. And they can get very negatively tweaked when their partner's unique erotic fingerprint or sexual style is less flexible post new relationship energy. What does that mean? Whatever our sexual style is in general, when we're in the throes of lust with new partners, we tend to be more flexible and we're more willing to explore. If we aren't really explorers to begin with, we're more willing to be game in general. So this rough and tumble lover might really be upset if their partner in the throes of new relationship energy enjoy the rough and tumble sex as part of the game. But after the honeymoon wears off, the erotic fingerprint of the partner goes back into more, shall we say, soft and fuzzy kind of soulful lover type. So now we're going to talk about the needy lover. And what we know is they're generally needy people, not just in terms of sex. They may be less affected by desire curves ups and downs because their need for sex is triggered more by a desire for stress relief, affirmation of their worth or their importance, and the desire for attention. So because these needy lovers might be a bit more focused on their own experience, the partner might feel a little bit used, sort of like extraneous, since it's a neediness on the part of this needy lover. The giver and soulful lover, we'll meet the giver in a minute or two, but the soulful lover and giver might not mind being used by the needy lover if the needy lover stays present to the lovemaking and is therefore reinforcing of the experience. The rough and tumble lover or the explorer who we're going to meet might enjoy this partner because it presents with a way to increase the intensity of sex because the needy partner wants some affirmation and attention and to be wanted. So moving on, we're going to talk about the giver. So the giver gets turned on by the partner's pleasure. Their turn on is the partner's turn on. So we can make a distinction between the true giver versus the neurotic giver. The neurotic giver gives to get or manipulate, whereas the true giver just gets off on the partner's turn on. So true givers get off on the partner's turn on. Their turn on is literally their partner's turn on. And they aren't, in general, going to mesh well with lovers who have trouble with arousal or generally low levels of either spontaneous or responsive desire. So if their partners aren't randy or getting turned on, it's going to be hard for the giver to get the turn on. So likewise, the givers may be more affected by plunges in the desire curve of their partners rather than their own changes. So in other words, as long as the partner has a turn on, the giver may be able to access his or her own sexual energy. So it's really the partner's turn on that drives this. The neurotic giver who's giving to get may have some personality issues rooted in imbalances of their panic grief system. The wired-in system that makes us sad might be out of balance in this neurotic giver. So by trying to please partners as manipulation or getting off by being martyrs, the neurotic giver is neither fun nor sexy. The true giver can be a blast, but you can see the true giver or giver in general may not mesh well with another giver because they're going to be sitting there and waiting like, where's the turn on? So if their turn on depends on the partner's turn on and the partner's turn on depends on their turn on, it might be not so great. So now we're going to talk about the anxious lover. They can become so incapacitated by performance anxiety that self-consciousness can squash their own spontaneous active desire and even their responsive receptive sexual desire. They're in their heads. So this style may be more of a hindrance for men since men are expected to initiate sex and perform. So I feel bad sometimes for men because unless their penises are cooperating and getting hard and staying hard and all of that, the people who are anxious may find it really difficult to just relax and have a good time and be attuned to the sensations of lovemaking rather than the goals of having a hard penis. So the anxious lover can experience a big boost in confidence from new relationship energy, which often has the power to temporarily override their self-consciousness and anxious feelings, especially in the context of a clearly exuberant lover or a partner who wants them so much that it can make them feel so wanted that they're not so much in their heads and not so much worried about their performance. As the new relationship energy bump goes down, the anxious lover feels that loss acutely, usually, and may go into self-doubt, worry, self-consciousness. It goes into a kind of self-conversation. It could be, why does the partner not seem to want me so much anymore? And it could be, why can't I feel my own active desire so much? So these people worry, and worry is not so helpful when it comes to relaxing into sex. And as I talk about in my book, this lover often has an imbalance in the panic grief system where they tend to be predisposed to self-doubt and worry. So people who have a lot of anxiety tend to be very self-doubting. It's kind of a circuit. So this lover may have an issue in the core systems. Now, the low sex driver is somebody who doesn't have much of a sex drive. They're typically low baseline of desire, regardless of the circumstances. They may actually never experience sexual desire or pleasure because they may be very blocked in the lust system. So they, for some reason, probably because of having a lot of defensiveness energy, a lot of fear, rage, sadness, grief, they may not be in touch with their lust system. Others may border on being asexual, and those are people who just don't have the desire for sex, period. Some of these people still want partnership and connection, but they actually even could be turned off at the idea of sex. So for the low sex driver in general, new relationship may bump up the appetite, which can be helpful. If in a long-term relationship with a partner who has a high sex drive, like the explorer that we're going to meet shortly, the responsive sex drive that the low sex driver has might be sufficient to keep sex alive for them, as long as their partners are willing to kind of supplement it with their high sex drives. Otherwise, the low sex driver is a tough match for any other erotic fingerprint, except maybe a low sex driver who doesn't mind not having sex. And that can be perfectly acceptable. There's no problem with having low desire if it's not a problem for your partner. We only define issues with sex drive if it's a problem for the person and or a problem for their partner. So now we're going to talk about the explorer. Yay! Explorers are unconstrained by norms. They're willing to explore sexuality, and they often require some intensity, some novelty, some real exploration. They can range from the toe dipper or to the major full tilt Arctic adventurer that totally is way out there. So these people tend not to be too affected by the downs of the desire curve. They're inventive and willing to find new ways to turn themselves and others on. By nature, they're explorers. They may have some high level of seeking in their seeking systems. If you read my book, their exploring abilities are highly developed. In the past, we previously pathologized people. These people as being kinky, sensation seekers with some kind of deficits in their dopamine system or trauma that drives their desire, for example, for S&M, which is sadomasochism or kink or BDSM or any of those things. Fortunately, some studies that have recently been conducted by my colleagues have shown that's not true at all. In fact, people who are explorers or people who do kink are no more disturbed. They don't have more pathology than the average bear. And even if you look at things like Shades of Grey, they always make it about the person who wants kink has some old experience of pathology or trauma. Not necessarily true at all. So for the record, clinical research has not borne out the notion that kinky people have any more pathology. Thrill seekers, these people may just be thrill seekers who have intense seeking systems coupled with high lust. And lucky for them, they have lots of things that they enjoy about sexuality, and lucky for their partners who enjoy that as well. So, what we can learn from extraordinary lovers, people who can teach us about our capacity for pleasure and comfort when we go beyond our comfort zones. And that will be another video, Lessons from Extraordinary Lovers. So now we can talk about how erotic fingerprints are dynamic and may overlap. They can change, particularly if that sexual style is impacted by an imbalance in emotion rather than reflecting an actual sexual preference. So, for example, if someone who is a low sex driver has their emotional systems better balanced and has better sort of connection with their lust system, they may not be a low sex driver. So with a needy lover might also become secure and shift to a giver or an explorer energy with time. So as I mentioned, the low sex driver might access higher baseline sex drives as the basement emotional systems rebalance. And the erotic fingerprints can change in the other direction if imbalances show up. So what can happen, an explorer whose seeking systems gets flattened might end up being more of a soulful lover. And no one erotic fingerprint is intrinsically better or healthier than another. The key here is viva la difference. And these can be flexible categories. You might find yourself in more in one than the other, depending on your mood or current situation. So after the throes of new relationship energy kind of come down and you might find some sort of disconnect with your love life, it may be because these are not meshing. So the key is to honor your own erotic fingerprint and respect your partner's fingerprint preferences. And these are malleable. Some people's are more flexible than others. Certainly, being ramped up in new relationship energy makes those styles more flexible. And understanding how you fit with your partner, how these overlap, can provide good fuel to keep lust alive. A lot of that is about having honest conversations with your partner, going to those scary places. And that's it for now, folks. I really enjoyed giving you this part of the show. And what we'll do is we'll come back for more. We're going to talk about particularly one good thing to discuss, as we mentioned before, the lessons from the people who are outrageous, extraordinary lovers. Thanks for being with me. This was a lot of fun. Bye.